Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I have a special guest from a place where I grew up. I didn't grow up there, but I listened to the music growing up. Dance hall was like huge back in the day. uh, Dr. Hylton, Karla, can you let people know where you're from?
Hi, Celeste. Thank you so much for having me on. And I am from Jamaica
Hmm
in the Caribbean.
Uh, yes. So you've always had that good weather.
Yes, yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, yes,
Have you
yes.
ever been to Boston before?
I have not. I
Oh,
need to
okay,
come
okay.
visit. Yes, I
Okay.
need to come visit.
Okay, so you're from Jamaica. I was just there over the summer. It's the weather's so beautiful. So Georgia is a hot, it's a nice area. And when I was a teenager, I moved to Georgia for like 3 years and came back when I was like 19, and I started to um, hate the winters. Before it was just the only thing I knew. I just knew that in
Hmm.
the fall it starts getting cold, and then when I got to experience a different kind of winter, I was like, why do people stay here?
and
um,
and for me, Georgia is cold because I was in Georgia in May and I thought it was quite cold.
you were so spoiled,
I
Karla.
know, I know.
Like, so if I'm talking to somebody from like Georgia or Florida, they'll be like, "Well," I'll be like, "How's the weather?" They be scared to say anything about being cold. I said, "Listen, don't talk to me about being cold because I can show you cold." um, but thank you so much for being here. Dr. Hylton created a book. She has many books. You were gonna kind of focus on this one where she kind of shares her story, and I want to start with a little bit about your upbringing, about how you were raised in Jamaica. What did that look like for you?
Okay, so I am a Jamaican born and grown, and I actually grew up. My early days were spent on a sugar plantation. Jamaica, in those days, were well known for sugarcane production to produce
Mm.
sugar, right? Cane sugar. So I was brought up, both my parents worked on the sugar estate, and my parents are from an East Indian background, and I was brought up with most of those traditions wherein as a young lady, well, as a girl, you were expected to be prim and proper, and you were also expected to know how to please a man. And I think that was part of my upbringing that led me to certain issues I had later on in my marriage, because I was brought up to be submissive. I saw my mother being submissive to my father. My childhood was a bit dysfunctional, to say the least. I grew up with an alcoholic father. He was also a womanizer. Yet still, I adored him. I loved him more than anybody else on the well. I really, really, truly loved my dad because he showered me with love. I was the only girl, and I felt, very special in his eyes. I was the eldest of four, and so I have three brothers, three younger brothers. So being the only girl, I was sort of coddled and by my father. He just utterly adored me. Um, the relationship with my mother wasn't as good as in my eyes as it was with my father. It's a very complicated relationship that occurred between myself and my parents. Um, During my childhood, I experienced a very, traumatic home invasion
Yeah.
where myself and my younger brother were removed from the home along with my parents, and we were under attack, so to speak, where we had about 9 armed gunmen holding us hostage, so to speak. And yes, this was when I was 5 years old.
Oh my God.
And I believe that that definitely affected my whole psyche. You know, I was traumatized. I was faced with death because we did think we were gonna die. We didn't, but that thought crossed everybody's mind, right?
So after that home invasion, it wasn't like you got therapy or you didn't, did you have services or anything like
Right.
that?
So that's a long time ago. That's about 50 years ago. And
Right.
in Jamaica,
I know. I just thought I asked.
yes, we didn't actually have those things.
I
And
know.
I was living, I mean, at the time we were living in the country parts, so to speak. So those are the rural areas. So
Mhm.
there was no psychiatrist or psychologist around. So, I didn't get any assistance, neither did my parents.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're looking at that experience outside of like your dad struggling with substance use. You're looking at experience is pivotal in the changes in your brain chemistry, like your mental health. You think that was a pivotal point for you, and if so, how did that affect you? You think for the rest of your years growing up?
Okay. After that robbery, the police were able to catch most of the
Oh,
men involved, right? And
yeah.
it meant that my parents had to go to our major court, which was about 2 or 3 hours drive away from where we lived.
Dang.
So they had to go frequently to testify, against
Yeah.
these men. And our court system is not like in the US, it's rather drawn out. Okay. So
Oh,
I
okay.
remember the panic that I would feel when they would have to leave, but that they would have to leave me with friends, and the panic, the sense of that they're not going to come home, that I'm going to be abandoned. And I think that fear of abandonment carried through even to today. Perhaps I have that fear of abandonment. I have seen where people are put in situations that could lead to them leaving, and that fear has always been with me. And I'm trying to hold on to persons who might not want to be held on to.
Wow. And then I know mentally there was a struggle, and I know education, whether it's Jamaican culture or like because you grew up there, and for your family it was important. Did that affect your um education or your schooling? Were you able to focus on school, or did you find yourself distracted?
Well, surprisingly enough, I did focus on my education. It was a pet peeve of my dad, especially.
Oh.
He was very, very insistent that I achieve academically. And
Mhm.
even though he himself was not well educated at all,
Mhm. Mhm.
because he's coming from indentured slavery days, where his parents were indentured
Mhm.
servants. I don't know if you know what that means, but they
Yeah,
were,
yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
okay, right. And so he was not well educated. However, he was brilliant. He could read a book and tell you everything, and he could remember things. He was brilliant in my eyes. He just didn't have the
Formal.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And so he made sure that I had all the opportunities, and his emphasis for me was education. He actually wanted me to become a medical doctor. However, I thought I diverted, but he was still pleased so long as I had the doctor in front of the name,
Mhm.
you know. But,
Mhm.
so he was all about academics. My mom, on the other hand, I think was not so much for academics. She wanted me to learn more how to cook and to clean. And again, I don't blame any of them. It's just a
Yeah.
cultural thing. It's
Yeah.
cultural.
Oh, so your dad, because I get the cooking and cleaning from your mom's culture perspective, but your dad, it sounds like he didn't treat you like the culture would. He wanted you to be what he couldn't be, it seems like.
Yes, 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 yes. He wanted me to be educated. He wanted me to be independent. In fact, when I got married, I think he hoped that I would keep my maiden name by having the doctor in front.
Wow. That's how much, yeah, it was, you guys are, you and your dad probably were more alike.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I do believe that.
yeah, yeah. But he definitely was I mean, without the struggle with alcohol, I'm sure you would have seen a different side of him for him to still be able to do that and struggle and not have a lot of times there's a lot of insecurity when people didn't have the education and the kids are succeeding sometimes. So it's like nice that for him to pull that out of him even with the struggles is pretty impressive. Um, so education wasn't an issue. What about socially? Did you talk about the abandonment piece being part of your life even till today? Did you find yourself being in friendships with people that may not have been the best for you and struggling in that atmosphere?
Well, again, because I was so sheltered, so to speak, I
Mm,
don't believe I was allowed to have many close friends.
okay.
So I grew up more a loner. I felt
So
alone a
you felt
lot.
awkward. Did you feel awkward? Like, did you get bullied? Because it sounds like you were raised different than the place you were. It wasn't like it was different. The way you're describing how you were was is not how Jamaicans are. So what did that do to your esteem?
Low self-esteem I suffered from, despite the fact, and it's strange because my father always tried to tell me how beautiful you were, how proud he is, etc., etc.
Mhm.
Yet still I suffered from great low self-esteem, and it's just been over the past few years that I've been able to be climbing out of that well,
Mhm. Mhm.
that I've fallen into.
And part of it cuz like you were different and you were raised different. It sounds like you were really smart even despite all of the things that kind of went on. For people that may have had like challenges in their life and they may learn differently or they may not adhere to the cultural standards, what would you say to them? Because I know, like, if you go back in time, you would tell the younger version of Karla, like, it's okay to be different. And, I see the titles of your books. And so now I'm understanding where that, the kid books, where that
Okay.
comes from. It comes from your experiences, it sounds like.
Yes, yes, yes. If I was to speak to my younger self, I would want to encourage her to make friends. I didn't make a lot of friends. And
Mhm.
again, as you mentioned, because I was different, and I was different not only because of how I was brought up, but I guess in the long run, that's what it boils down to. But it was because I was in a community where I was one of the few, if not the only person of East Indian heritage.
Oh, okay.
So at
Mhm.
school, you would be teased. People would come up and want to pull your hair because your hair is different from theirs. So I had a lot of that to deal with, the community
Oh.
that I lived in.
Whew.
And at that time, that's 50 years ago, or,
Right, right.
right? Things
Yeah.
were very different.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And so it's not like where you were able to like talk about it in therapy and
No.
so I'm assuming you internalized a lot of this stuff and looked
Yes,
at yourself. And I'm not just because your dad was telling you how beautiful you were and like really being kind to you. Part of you is probably saying, well, that's my dad. He's supposed to say that, right? So
exactly.
I'm not, but then you got all these other people in the community and kids that are your age that you're seeing every day in school treating you differently. Like that's of um
Mhm.
a lot of things that easily I can see how you internalized it. Um so I want to like fast forward. You get out of high school and then you go to college because you have your PhD.
Yes, my PhD is in biotechnology.
And I was gonna say, and it's not like I'm not trying to like belittle my degree in psychology, but it ain't no biotech. That's why I was like, oh, you smart, smart.
No.
How did you end up doing that? And was that prior to your marriage or in the middle of it? How did that happen?
It was in the middle of my marriage. So I actually knew my husband from um, primary level education.
Which one is
We,
primary? Because it's different.
we call it primary school out here. I don't
What
know what, or
like is it like elementary, like fifth
yes,
grade? Oh,
yes,
okay.
elementary. elementary school. Yes,
Oh, so
yes,
he
yes,
already knew you were
yes.
easily,
But we
yeah.
were never friends.
Okay.
We went to the same high school, and I didn't really like him because he was considered the bad boy, so to speak, and I was a good girl, you know. So, but when I was about 18, when I was 18, and I was getting ready now to leave my parish, the place that I live, to come into the capital city, which is Kingston,
Mhm.
to do my first degree at the
Mhm.
University of the West Indies.
Mhm.
He also moved from that parish to find employment in Kingston.
Mm.
And so I had to board at the university because it's some distance away from home.
Mhm.
So I was living on campus,
Mhm.
and he was working in the same parish. And he just came by and started to visit, and you know, we developed a friendship, and there was
Mhm.
you know, that developed into romance. And so after I finished my first degree at the age of 22, we got married. And then I had continued into my PhD, and I finished that when I was 25.
And up until that point of like dating and then getting married, things were fine. Like when you look back, that there was nothing there that would have alerted you to like narcissism or anything like that.
I did see a sign.
Did you see it in hindsight or in the moment?
In the moment, I think I saw
Oh,
it, but I just wanted to fool myself and just, I have this ability to just block certain things from my brain, you know,
we'll say we'll let's just for
in
people
quotation,
that
right?
are listening, let's just because I don't want people to think we can really block stuff
No, we
out.
can't, right?
We can try, but that's what we do, black people. We be trying, but it be catching up with us, man. Especially when it comes to relationships. Like that's especially thinking about your history, the abandonment piece, and being taught culturally, and it's nothing wrong with the way the serving your partner. It's the abuse piece that's the issue, right? And so you come from a mindset and your self-esteem low that I can see how you wanted to block it out. It was to protect you so you can not be abandoned and still be in this relationship, right?
You're so right. That's exactly it.
Okay.
You know, I'm not the type of person to just leave a relationship. This was my
Right.
first relationship. And
Dang.
it was like, so the first person I've kissed, you know,
Yeah. So
etc.,
that
etc.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
I know. I know. So, like, why would you leave, especially being a quote unquote good girl? Like, this is what you're taught, like, and to be a wife. And so, like, we can get past that, right? It's just like the things that
exactly.
you've seen, we can get past it. When did it get to the so then you were did he kind of like try to muzzle your voice because you're kind of working on like leveling up as far as your degree and stuff? Like, was he okay with that?
He was okay with that, or that was the impression I got at the time, that he was okay. Because he himself was also, although he had to work, he was also working on his education as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Right. So, so he continued his tertiary education, but he was working at the same time. But I was able to, fortunate enough to just focus on tertiary
Oh,
education.
okay. Oh, okay. And then when did you start to really think about I gotta get out of this relationship? Because Carla's book, The Unvarnished Truth, talk goes into like details about how she was able to turn her purpose into pain. And I know it's a process. You now is you went on a healing journey, and so like my goal is always to let people like look at the process. But what was it that made you start to rethink this relationship? Because that's been your identity, like being in this relationship, being a wife, like um has been part of the identity that you was raised to be, and the idea of changing that must have been like a grieving time for you. It must have been really hard to think that I don't know if I can stay in this relationship anymore.
Yes, so I mean, we were married for 27 years before I
Mhm.
actually left. So we were in a romantic relationship for at least 31 years before I
Damn. That's a
left. So that was
long time.
basically that's a lifetime,
That's a
you know,
lifetime. Yeah.
right? And I had two children. The marriage, okay, I, in my opinion, you know, we got married too young, but
Hmm.
um, 40, 30 years ago, that was the thing. You know,
Yeah,
people did
yeah,
get
yeah.
married at that
Hmm.
time. So we hadn't become what we were going to become yet. He was
Hmm.
still studying, I was still studying. We were not truly adults, I would want to say.
Right,
You know, we were
right,
not
right.
truly mature enough to know if we had the same values, the same, you know, dreams, etc. However, when the children came, I think we really did make a good go of it in terms of the fact that both of us, our focus was directed at the children.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So it was all about the children, but then
Okay.
we forgot about
About y'all.
he and
Yeah.
I, right? You know,
Yeah.
there was no he and I, there was mommy and children, daddy
Hmm.
and children. And so there was a big disconnect between he and I as a couple. I do believe we were, you know, 80% unified when it came to raising the children,
Oh, nice.
right? But
Hmm.
as a couple, we didn't, there was a lot of things that occurred. Um, Even when my first child was born, before my second child, I had witnessed something that spoke of infidelity,
Hmm.
but and I definitely thought about leaving my husband. I only had one child at the time, but I felt as if it would be a disappointment to be divorcing, and you know it's just not part of my culture, and
Especially
you
back
know
then.
right,
It's
exactly.
yeah.
Right. And so, and I wondered too, because at that time I had devoted most of my energies to child raising. So even though I had one child, I wasn't, you know, in a place where I was earning enough money that I thought I could support myself and the child if it came to that. You know, I was also of the view, knowing who my husband was, that he would fight me for custody of the child, and that, in my opinion, he would probably use some underhanded means to make that happen. And that scared me. I did not want to lose my son. And so these were all the factors. And again, because of who I was, I didn't discuss it with other people. I just kept it bottled up. So I didn't tell any friend. I didn't tell my mother, my father. Nobody knew what I was going through. And so it was just all there. And looking back in hindsight, I think I should have left. I would have been fine. But you know, I didn't feel the confidence
Hmm.
to do so. And you know, there were certain things my husband had put in place. I mean, he's my ex-husband now, but you know,
Hmm.
that would have made it difficult. For example, at the time when I believe he was unfaithful. We had just bought a house, and he had done the title of the house in such a way that it wasn't joint between himself and I.
Right.
And he was very cunning that way, and I didn't see it that way. And I didn't have much knowledge of finances. So I'm a scientist, and he's in finance, and he handled the finances. And I said, well, we're married, right? So he handled that. I handled the home and the children,
Hmm.
and you know, but that was where
Hmm.
I was, you know. And then go ahead, Celeste.
I just want to ask you really quick, before you, because I want you to go into like when did the final thing. But when you said I kept things bottled up, I didn't share and stuff, and which I think it's important not to be airing out your business. But I also understand when you don't have an outlet, that it creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, like a heaviness. You don't have to like literally gain pounds, but you feel heavy. When you look back at like the way you kept things bottled in and you got now you're a new mom and trying to create this identity that you were taught, like do you remember feeling heavy from just holding on to all this
Oh,
stuff alone?
definitely, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. It was too much. It was a lot,
Yeah.
and but anyway, we continued the marriage, and the death of my father when I was 29, the sudden death, triggered my need for another child.
Mm.
And I really enjoyed being a mom.
Mhm.
It was my thing. That's just who I am. I like nurturing children. I
I can
loved it.
tell, yeah.
I loved it.
Mhm.
So I had my daughter, and I just continued to devote my time to my son and my daughter. They were number one. They were the center of my world, and I I want to caution persons who are listening that, while yes, you must love your children, and yes,
Yeah.
they are important, do not make them the center of your
Thank
world.
you, girl. All right, I was gonna ask you about that because I know you we and I have to talk to moms all the time about this. And I get it. It comes from part of it too is not just your relationship not being intact, but your childhood and you probably felt alone a lot and a lot had happened. So you're like, I'm gonna give my kids a different experience. So I
That's
completely understand where the mindset comes from. And it's like, you suffer more because you're not taking care of yourself. Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
true. I
Yeah.
was trying to overcompensate whatever. As I said, I didn't feel as if I had a very good relationship with my mom. So
Yeah.
I use her as an example of what not to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then I
yeah.
think I overdid it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I get
So,
100%. I understand.
so that's what happens. So please do not, make your children the center of your world. I mean, they are important, love
Yes.
them, and so
Yes.
on. But, you have to have something for yourself. You
Yes.
have to
Yes.
have a meaning for your own life, a purpose for your own self. And a purpose cannot be the children.
Yeah, because once they turn 18, once they move on, you're gonna have a hard time figuring out what's next for me because you never really created anything.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
that's what happened to me.
Oh, okay.
That's what happened to me because I ended up leaving my job completely just because I wanted to be the one
To
to
do
do
everything.
everything for the children. I
Yeah.
wanted, and I mean, my husband agreed, obviously. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and we were able to afford it, fortunately. So, in Jamaica, we have to transport children from one activity to the other. It's not at the school always,
Oh,
so we
okay,
have to
yeah.
take them here, there, and everywhere. They're doing
Yeah.
piano, they're doing ballet, they're doing football, whatever it is, we have to
And you was
transport.
loving it, right?
I,
You was
I was.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
was loving it. I was loving it. I loved the car rides from place to place. We would have conversations about this and
Wow.
that, and that was the type of relationship. So I loved it. And but at the same, all while this was happening, the relationship between my husband and myself was deteriorating rapidly.
Yeah.
And there was, we ended up moving. We built a house, and it was a really lovely house. And I got very involved in the building of that
Process.
house. And then I was approached by a magazine to do a feature on the house and on me.
Oh,
And
wow.
I felt that was actually the beginning of, you know, I would say the beginning of the end
Oh,
because I started to gain in, and this is in my opinion, this is how I have assessed it.
yeah.
I started to gain attention. I started to do morning shows on local TV.
Sorry, what
Um,
was it about you in the house that caused them to approach you? Is it the way it looked? Like, what was it
yes,
about?
yes, yes. It was really a fabulous house, and I was the one that did the interior myself, even though I'm not.
Oh,
I helped
okay.
with the design and so on. It was very
Okay.
beautiful. It is a
Okay.
beautiful house.
Mhm.
And so, while my husband said he supported it, perhaps I should say, when I was approached by the magazine, he said, no, I should not do it. But my kids were in the room and they said, Daddy, why wouldn't you want her to do it? I want her to do it. We want her to do it. And then he agreed, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what was going in his mind, but there were other things that happened in the marriage now as my kids were now older, in their teens. My son was probably about 18. Um, One of the most dramatic things that happened was when my husband was accused of attempted rape of one of his staff members. This
Mm.
was never proven. He was never tried. But it was an allegation made that was reported to the police, and it got
Was it like a
sorted out.
big deal in the town that you were in?
Well, it would have been a big deal.
Uh-huh.
However, he was able to keep it quiet
Oh,
until
okay.
the young lady decided to drop the charges.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it did not end up being the court, but it was something that rocked my world because
Mm-hmm.
I had always had a suspicion that there was something going on between the two of them.
Mm. Okay.
But I have no proof.
Right, right, right. I understand.
Right? And so I just, my world was rocked. Who would, never, nobody expects that their husband is going to be accused of something like that, right?
So
So
at this point, you're still keeping everything in, right?
keeping everything in.
Like all the turmoil and things you're going through. It's not like anybody else you're talking to about this. Like at this point, with the accusation that happens with him.
Okay. At that point, no. So I ended up, though, a few months after seeking counseling because
Oh
it
wow.
was a lot.
Mm-hmm,
It was
mm-hmm,
a lot, and the whole turmoil lasted for about a month before the young lady decided to drop the charges. But
mm-hmm.
it was because it would have been a big deal in this country if it had
Oh, okay, okay,
reached, and the
okay.
embarrassment,
Oh yeah. And at this point, were you already in the magazine and being featured for
yes,
the? Oh
yes,
yeah. So yeah. Okay.
yes, 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 yes.
So do you think that you're like the being featured and doing all of these things? How did he take that? Even though he initially said no, but then yes, like how did it affect the relationship, you think?
He's a very quiet person, or he was very quiet with me. And
Okay.
so we didn't really talk about it. So I can just tell you what I perceived, and I
Hmm.
did not believe that he was happy about it.
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
started to write in the newspaper. He didn't read my articles, and I felt away. I mean, you're writing something in the paper, you want your husband to read it, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
you know, it's not that long. So
Yeah.
yes, I did not feel supported.
Okay.
I did
Okay.
not feel supported.
What was the turning point? 27 years, because you left. You was there for 27 years, but you uh, probably 25 or 26 years in, you were planning on how you can leave. I'm sure. Um, what did that look
So
like?
after the episode with the allegations of the
Yeah.
rape,
Yeah.
I had some health issues, and I was seeing a doctor.
Yeah.
To be brief, it's all there in the book, but to just
Hmm.
to be brief, we ended up having an emotional affair.
Okay.
It was, and I think it was out of the need. I'm not excusing myself. However,
Right.
I needed to talk to somebody. I needed somebody to connect to me emotionally. So it was
Right.
never physical. It was never physical. However, it was emotional.
Yeah.
My husband suspected after some time. He confronted me, and I admitted the truth.
Hmm.
He moved out of the master bedroom, and things just went downhill very, very fast.
Mm.
I was, when he removed my credit cards, I wasn't working at the time, really. I was just doing a little part-time
Oh,
sewing bee.
yeah.
I was like a prisoner in this beautiful home, but I was a prisoner.
Oh.
My brothers couldn't visit me. My mother couldn't visit
How do you
me.
tell them that?
I had to now start to talk.
Dang.
So,
And you know how many
and
people was looking at that big old house wishing they was in your situation, not
you know,
knowing that you living in hell?
you know what I'm saying, right?
That's crazy. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, and so that was a catalyst. And at
Mm.
that time, my children were over 18, both of them. So
So you
I
didn't
did
even
not,
have that for distraction.
right. I didn't, I thought that,
Oh my
it would be
God.
fine. But the truth of the matter is, I chose to leave the house because it was enormous. I could never afford to maintain it.
Yeah.
So I chose to leave, and I did not know that in my leaving my home, I was also leaving my children. What I mean, I knew that they would still be living there,
Yeah.
but they estranged themselves from me. And
Oh,
that,
right, because they were kind of what's the word? It was a barrier. It wasn't like they were involved in what was happening with you and him. You weren't even involved because you just kind of like out of sight, out of mind. So in their minds, you're the problem.
yes, in
Yeah.
their mind, I was the problem. I am the
Yeah.
one that left.
Yeah, I get
And
it.
in my mind, I think they believe that I should not have asked. I ended up having to seek the assistance of the courts
Mhm.
to get
Mhm.
a financial settlement, and I believe that might have been an issue, but they completely abandoned me, and that led me to
Depressed.
a second suicide attempt. I didn't mention my first. My first one was during the marriage. After being bombarded with a lot of derogatory comments, I attempted suicide impulsively. However, um, after I moved out of the marriage, I attempted suicide for the second time, but this time it was well planned and should have worked. Right? It should have worked. I was actually in a coma as in intensive care unit for a
Dang.
while. Because I could not imagine my life without my
Your
children.
kids, I know, I know. That must have been so hard because you dedicated everything. And I just want to say for the audience listening, when you talk like the emotional affair piece of it, like how easy it is to get wrapped up in that. I think about like your dad was the closest person to you. It sounds like over the years that when you were with him, your self-esteem probably looked different, and you lost him, and now you're in this relationship that's really motionless and it's empty, but there you have things, right? Like,
Mhm.
and if you didn't grow up with a lot of things, you kind of look at that as like, okay, like I'm doing well, I'm successful, I got this degree, and not real. And I tell people to pay attention to the way you define the success. Pay attention to like who you're trying to mirror, like make your day better than yesterday, not better than Carla's day, because Karla had all the nice things, but Karla wasn't happy. Karla didn't have peace.
Exactly.
And a lot of times that's the way people look at things, and they compare their life to somebody else's life, or they look at success as things. There's nothing wrong with things, but like your peace and joy should be a
Mhm.
part of your equation, and it's in the roadmap to what success looks like for you. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
Definitely so. Definitely so. Very accurate, Celeste. So, since the separation and the divorce, it has been a journey for me, a
Yeah.
painful journey, but I am now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I've had to, though that first 2 years of leaving and
Mhm.
the abandonment by my children, and
Mhm.
again, that refers to what I was always afraid of,
I
abandonment
know.
and rejection, which the two persons who one would think would never, ever, ever do that.
Right. Right. Right.
But I'm sure they're going through their own pain.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
going through their own pain, and my arms are open wide whenever they're ready. I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had to turn that pain. When I saw that, I woke up in the hospital. I did not die, you know. Um, you thought about it, you realize there must be some purpose here for me to do.
Wow.
You know? And I have been blessed with other children. And when I say other children, other parents'
Parents, yeah.
children, because
Mhm.
my business is in education, and
Mhm.
I mentor these 14 to 18-year-old children. I teach them, and they love me.
Mhm.
And as much as I would love to have the love of my own children, or my,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
it's something, and I know I'm making a difference in other
Yeah.
person's lives, and that's important.
Yeah, I love that for you where because when I talk to people for a living and I know like kids I've talked to people that are in the same family group and their experiences are look different and they've only had one side. It wasn't like you were dogging their like talking negative about their dad and all that, so that you really sheltered them from what was really happening for you too, because you weren't even paying attention to
That's
your
correct.
struggles. You were just like, it's all about my kids. So I can see how if you only have one side, how it looks like you're the problem. And I'm glad that like you haven't paused your life, because the hope is that they do come around and you can still like be doing something and they can see like you do have a life, and then you'll be able to hear them too. Like I'm sure you're open to hearing their side on what
I would
they.
love to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know this isn't easy, especially the way you raised them and the way you dedicated everything to them. I know that this is really hard, and I know somebody's listening to this that may have some similar experiences, maybe not the same like child mom relationships, but just hearing it from this angle, I think is really important. How have you besides being able to like use your work and be able to still provide, it sounds like your personality is like you love working with kids. I noticed it on your website with the books. But
Mhm.
how, besides that, how have you been able to emotionally work on healing? Because I know it's a daily journey. It's not like Carla's arrived, right?
Right.
You're always grieving. Like it's, I think grief of people that are still here is really challenging. And it's like you wake and I know you're grieving. So like what does that look like for you to work on, like working on staying engulfed in what's happening in real time, and like really working on creating joy and peace in your life?
Well, as you mentioned, it is a continuous journey,
Hmm.
Celeste. I think about my children every day, and I do pray for them every day. I
Hmm.
spend some time praying for them.
Hmm.
Their photographs are on my walls. I say hi to them in the mornings, and
Oh, okay. So that's
and
part of the helpful. That's been
and
helpful.
I just try to focus on other things, which
Hmm.
is not, I won't tell you that every day is easy. There's some days
Hmm.
that tears come to my eyes because, I wish I could take up the phone and call them, or,
Hmm.
but I've been blocked. So, I can't communicate.
Hmm.
Um, but I got busy with my book. Writing the book has been very, very, very therapeutic.
Therapeutic. I know it
Yes,
has.
okay.
Yeah.
It helped me so much in just writing it and getting involved in, I'm getting involved in some other community activities out here in Jamaica, just getting involved in things,
Yeah.
talking to people like you. I have been doing some other talks as well. And
Hmm.
it just helps. It really does help to get it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Um, I got a dog.
Oh, okay. That emotional support. That's good.
Yes. So
Yeah.
because you're living alone now, and I've never ever lived alone
I
before my
know.
life, and that has helped too. So I'm trying to keep my mind engaged, my body active, and
Good.
try to be positive.
I tell people that, and even though you hear Carla, she's trying to be positive, but like she said, there are some hard days. So she's no longer like pretending that she's fine when she's not fine. And I think that's important for people to hear. Because it's like I say, life is hard. I think that's one thing that's been able to allow me to get through hard moments, is saying like, after the rain there's a rainbow. And every day may not be the best, but looking at what I can find good in it. And so you being able to create systems in your life, I'm sure is allowing you to like put one foot in front of the other. And I know for you, it's a day by day thing, given the circumstances that you're under right now.
Yes, definitely.
So for people that are, you wrote this book for you mentioned like I'm very private and quiet. Like, how hard was that to put this on? I mean, like you're on the podcast. I mean, I know you're on, you're interviewing other places too, but like, how hard was that for you to put this information out there? Because I know it had to be a challenge to create this book.
It was something that I actually thought of doing about 2 years ago, and I think I wrote about 10 pages. And
Yeah.
then, I keep saying, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And it's just this year, and most people are very surprised when I tell them that I started it or restarted it then in June
Okay.
of this year, and by August I was done. I just sat down and finished it. It was
I
just
mean,
flowing. It was just like it was it was divine guidance.
yeah. Wow, I never would have thought. That's quick. That's quick. But I mean, Carly is so smart, so I'm not surprised.
Celeste.
I'm not surprised. And people who've written books like about themselves and their journey, they said it was a very therapeutic experience. There was a lot of emotions up and down, but it helped them see themselves. And for you to go so many years of holding things in and low self-esteem, and I'm sure that allowed you to have more grace with yourself and your inner child, like that, like the way that you may have been or didn't be. Did you find yourself having a little bit more grace, like thinking about like, I went through a lot, you don't once you put
Yes,
it on
yes,
paper,
yes, yes, yes.
because
I
you
realized.
just went through it. But it's like when you say it, because like people will, on the first therapy session, they share their story, but they'll talk about it as if they're reading a novel, and I'll be like, dang, that's a lot. And they be like, like they're looking at me like, what's the big deal? But it's because
Yeah.
that's been their story.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when you're in survival mode, which you've been in since that invasion, when you're in survival mode, you don't realize the pain that you're going through. Because even you said it, I tried to block it out. And I say it's the audacity of us to try to block out our experiences
Yeah.
as if our mind, and your degree, you know how the mind works. So you already know, like, it's like, how do we think we can actually do that?
Yes, it's all there.
It's all there, and it's going to show up in different ways, right? Like it's not like I cut my hand and I bleed and I'm like, oh, this blood came from the cut, right? The way our trauma shows up in our lives, unfortunately, it takes so many different turns that we don't even make the connection as to why we have fear, or why, like, something that happened at 5 years old, Carla is able to identify that it's affecting her today. And so that's the thing that I do. I'm really good at helping people connect dots, because a lot of times you don't see it. And if you're on the outside looking in, it's easier to see things when you're in the picture, unless you kind of work on living a more conscious life, which is hard because then you have to accept some of the experiences, which we don't want to do. So I appreciate you sharing this story. It took a lot of turns. You've taken a lot of turns. I always tell people, if you're still breathing, there's room for change. And you're like a living testimony of that. Literally, like, 2 suicide attempts, a 27-year marriage, that, like, and I know it all wasn't bad, I know there was some good moments, right? But a 27-year marriage that you had, some people can't see themselves outside of what they thought life was going to be like, so they stay in that stuck space. And it just breaks them down more and more. I say a lot of times people's physical ailments is because they're living under stress, and you mentally couldn't have stayed there even if you wanted to try, because so much damage was done. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I know, like, a lot of people are gonna find something in this story that's gonna help them move to the next day or go to the next level that they may have been holding themselves back, because we hold ourselves back, and we don't realize it. So I'm like, I hope do you feel proud of yourself for what you've been able to do, even despite all of the experiences?
Yes, yes, I do. At times I do. That still,
Okay.
there's all that's
I
still a
know.
little
I
bit,
I know. I ask my kids, my clients, when I hear, I'm like, wow, like, be proud of yourself, because that inner
Mhm.
voice matters. So I'm grateful to you. Any last things you want to tell people? Tell people how they can reach the book and your website and how they can find you.
Okay, well, they can find out more about me by visiting the website www.khylton, khylton.com. The book is available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes and Noble. And I hope they enjoy it.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Was I okay? Was this a okay experience with me?
It was a wonderful experience.
Oh,
Thank you so
good.
much for having
You're
me.
no, thank you for being on. I couldn't have I always tell people I can't have a podcast without you being willing to come on and share your story. So I'm grateful to you as well.
Thank you.